Hey, David Brewster here with another Chordplay, and this is the Chords of Jimi Hendrix. And of course, I'm not really going to say anything new or different about Jimi Hendrix that hasn't been said, hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of times. Jimi Hendrix was a very important pioneer and legendary, electric guitarist. And, obviously I never saw Hendrix in concert. I mean, he died long before I was even born. But, over the years when I first started playing guitar, I was kind of introduced to the electric guitar because of, Eddie Van Halen, and I started playing. And it wasn't until I was in college that I really kind of clicked with Jimmy. I was aware of who he was. I'd heard Purple Haze and some other songs, Foxy Lady and stuff. I mean, Foxy Lady's in Wayne's World, so I was familiar with his music. But I didn't really click, with Hendrix until later. And then I realized it wasn't so much, a shred thing like Yngwie or Impellitteri, and it wasn't this technical thing like Steve Vai or Satriani or something. I realized it was the vibe, the tone, the sound, the attitude. That was more, what Hendrix kind of did. He gave guitarists a new identity. But the first thing we really have to talk about is the Hendrix chord. I can't do a Chords of Jimi Hendrix Chordplay and not at least mention, the 7#9 chord. So, truth be told, I learned this actually from a Motley Crue song. I didn't learn it from Hendrix. When I learned the song Dr. Feelgood, there was this weird chord, and I thought, what in the world is that? And at the time, I really wasn't, I knew, like I said, I knew who Hendrix was. He came up, in guitar magazines all the time. But I didn't encounter that chord through Hendrix. I encountered it through Mick Mars, of all people. And then after I learned Dr. Feelgood, eventually, I started to kind of experiment with some of Hendrix's music. And when I finally sat down and learned Purple Haze, I was like, well, hey, there's the Dr. Feelgood chord. So yeah, I am showing my age. I was young. And obviously Hendrix was way before my time. But I did learn to appreciate and respect his music immensely. So most people know this shape, E7#9, in the key of E right there, with an A string root. And that's a very useful shape. That's appeared in hundreds of songs, not just, Hendrix. Obviously I mentioned Motley Crue, but that pops up in tons of music. Stevie Ray Vaughan used to play that a lot, which means Kenny Wayne Shepherd's played that a lot. And tons of stuff. You'll find it in jazz, you'll hear it in all sorts of different styles of music. But there are some different ways you can play that chord. You can play it here, but you can also refinger it and play it down here. The exact same chord. You can use your third finger. I kind of prefer, tucking my pinky in like that. But you can hear, same chord. And you can also play it like this, which kind of feels like a funky, ninth shape. But you've got a low E string root now. So there's 3 different flavors of E7#9. And really, within that chord, I've had a lot of students ask over the years, why does it sound so weird? It sounds weird because we have a major third and a sharp 9, which a sharp 9 could also be thought of as a flat third. So you're playing the minor third and the major third at the exact same time. But they don't call it a minor third, they call it the sharp 9 or raised second. So there's this nasty interval hiding right in the middle of that chord. And that's where it gets that telltale sound, is that dissonance. But within the framework of the chord, you kind of lose, how dissonant that actually is. Now take a song like Spanish Castle Magic. There Hendrix did a really interesting alteration to his, 7#9 Hendrix chord. Instead of fretting it, in the traditional way and just moving it here, he basically opened up the B and the high E string like that. And so he's doubling the B that we're already fretting there on the G string. But then the high E string open is providing the sharp 9, that raised second. Jimmy definitely loved, like partial chords and little pieces of, dyads, and, he would play full chords, bar chords, and he definitely, kind of patented the thumb wrap, for some of those bar chords. And we'll talk about that in a minute too. But just take a song, kind of a lesser known song, Long Hot Summer. He's using these partial chords. He's also using a little bit of vibrato, where it's really interesting to hear, the notes of a chord move around like that instead of just playing a static chord and it's stationary. It gives it a little bit of movement, a little bit of life. And we've talked about, vibrato on chords in a few episodes already. But this is a killer little riff. Just a really cool, kind of funky, dirty, riff, but I like it. Now another song like Wait Till Tomorrow. Wait Until Tomorrow has those, kind of 70s chords that we've looked at before. And he's arranging it, between, it's, I guess, kind of outlining like the 1 and the 4 chord in E. And then he moves it down a whole step and does the same thing, D to G. So he's doing this little... And I've always liked that little bouncy riff, it's cool. That's one thing I really love about Hendrix's rhythm style. It's active. It's very, energetic. There's a lot of movement. There's sliding. There's hammer-ons. There's vibrato. There's a lot going on. There's just, way more than just static strummed chords. He was always doing something and moving somewhere, sliding somewhere. At the end of that riff, you could see I was doing the thumb wrap on A, and that is one big thing that I picked up from working on, Hendrix's music, is just learning how to use my thumb like that. Now, he had extremely large hands. I've got pretty big hands too. But his thumb was insane. I've seen some photographs. It looked like he had, just crazy, NBA basketball hands, where it's like, God, he could probably palm a basketball, no problem. And still somehow play a guitar solo, with the basketball in his hand. But, just take like an A major bar chord. And the first thing we're going to do is get rid of the note on the A string. So we're losing that. And so if you think of, those remaining 5 strings, we're really just grabbing that partial bar chord here. And then your thumb's just going to sneak around and fret, that 5th fret on the low E to play an A. But it's also cleverly kind of hiding, that A string. It's muting that A string out. So your thumb actually has 2 purposes or 2 jobs right there. Fret the low E and mute the A. And we can move that around all over the place. And we can also convert that to minor, right? And take another song like Bold as Love, where he's kind of just outlining E, A, F sharp minor, and a little bit of D. But he's using that thumb wrap. Really interesting guitar part, and I love the way he just kind of, has this syrupy approach to these chords where they just kind of run and smear into each other, which is really cool. Next example is from the song Angel, and he's doing some really interesting, it's kind of flirting with like a major 9, and then he starts finding all these E6 variations, and really interesting chord song, and it's a really good song too. I think it's one of my favorites. But there he's kind of doing like this E major 9 thing, and then he's going to move that down and find, an E6. It's actually an E6 sus2 sus4, but it's still, part of that E6 family, I guess. But it's it's a really unusual fingering too. You're using all your fret hand fingers. So I love that, he loved, exploring and kind of experimenting with these unusual chords. And then he basically hikes it all the way up to where you're on the 9th, 11th, and 12th fret. And that also functions as an E6. Move it up 2 frets and you're still playing an E6, believe it or not. Very ugly kind of outside sound, but then he runs right back to that E6. So it's interesting to find him just moving that one shape. Last idea here, I'm going to expose a little bit of his kind of soul and R&B phrasing. And this is an area that a lot of people have asked me, can we work on Lil Wayne? Can we work on When Cries Mary? Can we work on Castles Made of Sand? And he used this idea in all those songs and many other ones too. But it's that movement, between chords, and you hear these little kind of, hammer-ons and slides and stuff, and he was a master at this, and I think especially for a guitarist like Hendrix, he was a big blues fan. He loved blues. Obviously he loved rock too. But he was, also, touring on the kind of R&B and soul circuit, Little Richard and a whole bunch of people like that. So he picked up all these little moves, back when it was Jimmy James and the Blue Flames, long before the Experience was even put together. But to approach this, let's just look at, B minor and E minor to start. And from there you can kind of expand it into major chords and other, tonalities, and you can move it around the fretboard. But instead of thinking of chords, don't think of bar chords for this. You can, like in the back of your mind, you can remember where those chords are. But what I want you to do is think of minor pentatonic scales, because I believe that's what Hendrix was kind of imagining or envisioning when he would do this. He's not around, we can't really ask him, but I'm guessing, if he were able to answer that question, he probably would say, oh yeah, I'm just thinking of pentatonics. I could be wrong, but in my mind, when I see, some of the things he does or did, that's what I think of. So think of like the B minor pentatonic box. And we're just going to grab dyads on the way down. Now we can expand this up to the B and the high E. We can do something like that. And then we're just barring the 7th fret and adding, that A note there on the 10th fret on the B string. Let's do the same thing on the G, B, and then we're going to add, that 9th fret on the G string. Do the same thing on the D and the G. Same thing on the A and the D. And we're just basically adding these little, extensions and kind of flirting, with those notes. We're creating movement, almost like the vibrato concept, but now we're actually doing it with different notes and hammer-ons and pull-offs. Now in that same position, we could also find, like shape 4 of E minor pentatonic. Right there. So if we wanted to play with that, we could actually grab, the 8th and 7th fret there on the B and the high E, add the 10th fret like we did with B minor, and then basically move over to the G and the B, and now add the 9th fret on the G, like that. We're going to keep that double stop on the 7 and add 9, so it's the same as it was for B. I could expand this into a second episode, because Hendrix had a lot of interesting things he did with chords. Sliding them, and all the little things. All the things he really excelled at doing, there's a ton of songs. You can go through almost his entire catalog of music, and every song you'll find something unique or interesting or different that you can learn from. All right, that's a wrap. So leave some feedback and some comments, and please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back with some more content, lessons, and material very soon. Thank you.